Hi everyone and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is November 30th, 2017. Sumo is the national sport of Japan right next to baseball, and their grand champion, Harumafuji, just resigned yesterday to take responsibility for a little bit of a kerfuffle that happened in the stable, Michael.
It's more than a little kerfuffle. Someone had to go to the hospital, and now a police report has been filed. And indeed, the police are about to send the documents to the prosecutors. So there's going to be some kind of criminal action.
This is huge news. I left for the United States a week ago. This was actually a week old at that point, and I come back yesterday, and it's front page. It is huge news. Why is it so?
Well, the two things. First off is that, okay, the perpetrator and the victim are both from Mongolia.
Right.
And in fact, it was a reunion of Mongolian wrestlers from various stables and various places. They were having a get-together, and it was supposed to be a social occasion, and it got out of hand.
They don't often do this, do they?
Well, they do, actually, but they certainly the getting out of hand, maybe not so much, but we must remember Asashoryu also, he had to leave for beating up someone after a drinking bout, and this involved alcohol, and the reputation of Mongolian wrestlers is that their alcohol consumption is off the charts. That, of course, plays into certain prejudices that involve sumo.
Okay.
The second is that it happened, that the story burgeoned right as the Kyushu tournament was underway. So there was this incredible tension. We can't really talk about the people who are on the dohyo, but they're intimately involved in the story, and we're pretending that that's not going to affect the what's happening in the tournament. But of course it is, and that really trying to avoid the story, trying to not tell the story, but the story tells itself, kind of momentum grabbed the nation's attention.
Sumo teams are organized into stables, right?
Well, yeah, they're stables, yeah.
And the hierarchy of winners, losers ends with a grand champion. There is one grand champion per tournament.
Yeah, that's in this case, the stables, the beya, there are a certain number of licenses that are available for former champions to open up or take over a training facility. And the training facility is extremely hierarchical, with the most decorated, the highest ranked wrestlers essentially being the gods of the place.
It's a pecking order.
And the pecking order.
Right.
I mean, this is not, I'm not making this up. The lowest ranked wrestlers actually, because the massive bulk of their
Don't go there.
you don't want to go there?
No.
That they actually help them, the larger wrestlers, in the toilet to cleanse themselves. That's one of the jobs of the lowest rank wrestlers. It's an extremely hierarchical, extremely traditional,
Very respectful.
very respectful,
right?
was supposed to be, and very repressive society. Suddenly, in the 1970s and 80s, foreign wrestlers enter into this. And so it's not a purely Japanese thing. And there's that tension. And the tension has just simply exploded in the fact that even though it is Japan's national sport, it is no longer in any way dominated by Japanese. In fact, it's been dominated for basically the last 15 years, if not 20 years, by Mongolians.
Right. It used to be the Hawaiians. The Hawaiians came in really strong. They had 2 or 3 grand champions.
Yes.
And now the Mongolians, almost every tournament, they're coming out on top.
Well,
it's been, 15 years?
Yeah, there's only one Japanese Yokozuna, and there was the first one in over a decade. He won one tournament and then a second one, but ever since, with his injury, he's been completely out of it for the last 5 tournaments, and he may never indeed come back. So the only Yokozuna there are were Mongolians. And one of them, Harumafuji, yesterday resigned to take responsibility for the shame brought upon the sport by this altercation, which resulted in a lower-ranked wrestler going to the hospital.
Right. Well, one of the reasons why this has reached, the public eye is because the stable master, who was Yokozuna himself, decided that he was going to call the police rather than to have it resolved inside the Sumo Association.
The issue of a closed society dealing with its own problems has dogged sumo for a very, very long time, and it's only every once in a while, and indeed in truly heinous cases, where the internal violence and the hazing,
right,
and of course the omerta, the policy of don't talk about it to the outside world, is breached. That happened a few years back when a young man, a 17-year-old boy, was killed by his fellow stablemates at the orders of the stable master. They beat him with a baseball bat, and he died of his injuries. It still took a very long time for the story to come out, for the prosecution to go forward. The stable master was eventually sent to prison, but not on first-degree murder charges, and the other members of the stable were not prosecuted for manslaughter or murder. It seemed that they got away with murder, so that sumo has this problem with violence. Now, of course, it's a violent sport.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is, and it's about it. And people say it's all about guys pushing each other around. And if you've seen sumo, it's about getting a slap in or slap the tsupariai. Tuck, 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 tuck. And they come away with bloody noses, bloody faces, teeth knocked out, all kinds of things from those kinds of bouts. And they are huge men, capable of immense feats of strength. It is not a beautiful sport of elegant moves and all that. It's incredibly rough. That being the case, when they are incapacitated, as it seems Harumafuji was with alcohol, he lost control and when a younger wrestler showed disrespect toward him. And he used objects, it's not clear which one, in a room to beat this person, not insensate, but beat them bloody. And
it wasn't just a one-on-one. I mean, there were other people in the stable that were...
Yeah, and the greatest grand champion of them all, Hakuho, was also at the party, and he grabbed Harumafuji and pulled him out of this private room that they were in, and he's physically much larger and could hold down this man as he was out of control. The question, of course, is, if this were Japanese only, would it still be hushed up? Is it because they're Mongolians that they're going after it? Because there has been this great backlash / nostalgia over the fact that there are so many Mongolians.
And we kind of don't like that.
We don't. Kind of is hardly the word.
Right.
Yeah. The traditionalists of the sport don't like it. And it has to be understood that sumo has a very specific place, particularly in the Abe administration, in that under the Abe administration's the time that Abe was prime minister back in 2006, 2007, they established as a part of the middle school curriculum the responsibility to teach traditional arts. And then they really limited what the traditional arts were, and it was judo and sumo. And I don't think kendo makes it, kyudo doesn't make it.
How about that?
Yeah, but sumo is one of them. And I'm trying to remember what the third one is. But it's part of the curriculum in many places. So it's really elevated in Japanese society in that regard. For it to have this stain of violence and again, the cover-up, makes it really hard for the...
There are two aspects of it that really intrigue me. The first is that isn't this a kind of a microcosm of how Japanese corporations also run? And I think there are some parallels there. And the second one is that sumo is a kind of Shinto rite. It's a kind of a part of the religion. And these fellows who are on the dohyo, who are actually wrestling, are performing some sort of a ritual. And that's why it's so important to keep it in a very composed way, and probably why the Sumo Association is so devoted to kind of keeping it down and keeping these bad stories out. They haven't been successful this time, though.
Absolutely. And there is always the talk about hinkaku. Right?
Define that word.
That glittery quality of true purity that a a true sumo champion has. And indeed, when the first foreigners became ozeki and then yokozuna, there was, do they have hinkaku? Really? Can they actually be? And of course, with the domination of the sport by Mongolians, is there hinkaku in the sport? This kind of incident involving a group of Mongolian wrestlers immediately brings up this question of purity. But you're right, it's absolutely has a strong association with Shinto.
Salt.
They throw salt to purify it, and women are not allowed to stand on the dohyo. A few years back, the governor of Osaka was a woman, and they had said, okay, well, there is the governor's prize for the Osaka tournament. Well, she can't give it. And for a country that is more and more, we have womenomics and such things, more and more geared and more focused on women getting access, becoming empowered, this archaic, you are an impure creature, you cannot stand on this sand that is so pure, really, it made very clear that this was an incredibly conservative bunch of folks who truly believe in these semi-mystical voodoo kind of aspects to the sport, which is basically large men who overeat, throwing each other around.
It is entertaining, though, isn't it?
It is incredibly entertaining, and you can get very much into it and know all the different
the moves, the throws,
but also the different characteristics and behaviors of all the wrestlers. They all have these tics. They all develop these little gestures that are associated only with them. So it's very individualized.
Right.
And that's another aspect of it, is that you really know these people. And therefore, when Harumafuji fails, the legion that are his fans and those people who are following him, it's very personal. It's rough, and let's face it, you see a lot of their skin.
Right. But what about the parallels that sumo has with the regular, how society, not quite society, but how companies are organized and how they punish people, how they
you can talk about
educate them?
You can talk about the Dentsu case with the young woman who committed suicide
right.
as absolutely parallel.
Right.
It's an oppressive, self-enclosed world where underlings and their superiors.
You don't need to call the cops. We've got this covered.
We got this covered. This is the way it's always been done. It helps improve their psychology, that they get a lot of pressure or they get a lot of physical abuse. It'll make them better people / better managers in the future. Absolutely. Of course, in the case of Dentsu, making advertising copy, or in the case of NHK, making television programs, does not involve slapping people around and throwing them, etc.
Right.
But nevertheless, sure, there are parallels, and particularly it has come out that the parallels are especially stark, indeed, as women get into the corporate world. All of these very, very testosterone-soaked ways of behaving in the corporate world are becoming untenable. If within a situation where there is only testosterone, where you're such as the sumo world, how long it will take before there's going to be a breakthrough in saying we really have to rethink the way we do this. It may never come because because sumo is a sacred act.
Right. So since he's resigned and actually expressed a little bit of, or displayed a little bit of hinkaku by taking responsibility, now...
Well, we still have 3 yokozuna, 3 grand champions, the 2 Mongolians, Kakuryu and Hakuho, that still remain, and we have Kiseno Sato, who is the Japanese grand champion, who has been injured for the last 5 basho. And so we have the broken Japanese one, and we have, well, 2 somewhat controversial in the case of Hakuho. His role in all of this, and the statement that he made on the dohyo after winning the Kyushu tournament, has people kind of saying, whoa, well, one of the things he said was, I look forward to the day when both the injured wrestler and Harumafuji are back on the dohyo wrestling. Well, that's not going to happen now that Harumafuji has resigned. So the sport will go on, but There will be a police investigation, and it will just hurt the sport, which has had a really bad run for a very, very long time. The other aspect, of course, is the kaicho, the rijicho, the person who's in charge, the former Yokozuna Takano Hana. His role in all of this is very ambiguous and no one knows where he stands on all of this, and he has been absolutely, in almost a comical way, avoiding the press.
He stepped out, didn't he?
He
really did.
You get these these long telephoto lens images of him. No one is getting near him. He's in hiding all the time, and it's what is he doing? Why is he doing it? Who's in charge is the next aspect that will come up.
Yeah.
And this story will have legs.
Sumo, the national sport of Japan, is suffering right now as the grand champion has resigned. Please stay tuned.